Well, Duron Chavis,
Yes, sir.
welcome to Shine the Light. Thank you for taking a little bit of time and chatting with us today.
Yeah.
I know you're pretty well known in the community. I've certainly sort of perused a lot of videos and blogs and other stuff that you've done in the last few days. But just for our viewers who may not know, can you give us a little bit of background about your kind of personal journey to this? And maybe if there's one key organization that is behind a lot of this urban agriculture, talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. So, Duron Chavis, I'm a native of Richmond. Grew up right here on South Side. I am an urban farmer, father, husband, and the founder director of Happily Natural Day, the organization that stewards this space, Sankofa Community Orchard, that we're at today, as well as 8 other urban farms and gardens across the Richmond region.
How did food become the mechanism that you started to maybe form activism around?
Yes, Happily Natural Day is about 20 years old. And when we first started Happily Natural Day, it served as a festival, kind of convening around holistic health, wellness, and social change in the Black community. When I first started the festival, it attracted all types of activists, civil rights veterans, musicians, artists, poets, artisans. But one particular type of industry started showing up, and those were farmers. So the farmers became, I would say, mentors of mine as early as 2006-07. One farmer in particular, his name, Bernard Turner of Vanguard Ranch, approached me and, pulled me to the side and was like, yo, I love the fact that you're doing this event and you're talking about holistic health and wellness, but you need to start talking about where food comes from. And it was like a light bulb went off. Our later conversations will revolve around food security, Black farmer land loss, systemic racism, and the discriminatory policies that had led to the marginalization of Black farmers across the country. But he asked me a really pivotal question, probably like 26. I think my oldest son at the time was like 3. He asked me, what would you do if the grocery stores closed? And it was like really anxiety producing for me, right? I got a little toddler, right? And I live on South Side, and we had around that time, I can't remember if it was Hurricane Gaston, Isabel, or Floyd. One of those major storm events came through, knocked the power out. I was living at the time off of Hopkins Road, and I remember the grocery stores being closed. And, we had no way to really get food after we cooked all the fish and all the frozen items inside of the freezer. You go to the store and it's like there's nothing there. So from that moment forward, I decided that food was a really big part, had to be a really big part of our discourse as community activists. And the first thing that we did, we started doing pop-up farmers markets. And I would connect with a farmer from maybe about 45 minutes away, and I would aggregate their produce and then sell it on their behalf, and people would come pick up in a formerly red line neighborhood. We started in Churchill, and then we evolved into Brooklyn Park Boulevard, Barton Heights, Northside, and we still do that program to this day. So I got into this farming work backwards, sitting with those farmers selling their produce every week helped me appreciate the act of growing your own food. I didn't have any land though. So, I started feeling guilty that I had this older man, old enough to be my grandfather, bringing 200, 300, 400 pounds of produce into the city every week to help service this program. And I was like, well, something happens to him, and what do we do? And so I ended up starting my first community garden in 2012, and it exploded. Like, that's when lightning struck. The light bulb went off earlier talking to these farmers, but when I actually started practicing and learning how to grow food, like through the act of actually creating a community garden, I realized that there was so much more to it, and that there was not only a community-facing part, but an internal, personal part that really benefited me personally, right? Without it having to be anything related to like community activism or anything like that.
Yeah, I think it's interesting though. You talked a little bit about, what point did the idea of equity and education come in for people who come either to participate in work and grow this stuff, or even just come for events? Was that at the beginning, or did you start to evolve a broader mission?
It was an organic evolution. I like to think that our work is an emergent kind of work. It's an iterative work. As I said, we started with doing the festival, and through the festival, we connected with folks that were already farming. And so that conversation helped expand what we thought would be relevant. At first we were just like, we just need to bring people together, and, we need to change, create cultural change, things like that. But when we started transforming the built environment, that's when we realized that it was imperative for all of the theory around equity, all of the theory around justice needed to translate into tangible reality changes that people could taste, touch, see, and feel, right? And so when we started cracking earth and developing gardens, it was like, okay, this is just a taste of what's possible, right? A little 3,000 square foot garden with a couple raised beds and a pergola was like the taste test of a bigger vision that we are now living into, of what does it mean for us to have access to land and space and develop, assets for our community that do multiple things at once. So, it was these weren't learnings that we immediately came to. It was just things that evolved over time, and seeing what we were able to do and stretching ourselves in order to, meet, our imagination, right? Mm-hmm. Like, this space here is 5 acres. This is the biggest space that we actively steward. But because we were able to accomplish a 5-acre demonstration farm, now we're like, oh, okay, well, what does it look like for us to develop an 8-acre neighborhood development, right? Because we're working on the Bensley Agri-Hood project in North Chesterfield. Or what does it mean for us to develop a 1-acre tiny home community that is bordering a farm like we're doing in Petersburg, right? So it's just realizations that have come along the way that we have the capacity to transform our community on our own terms in a way that is reflective of our cultural reality as people of African ancestry. Yeah.
I'm curious. We're architects, so we're constantly designing things. Most of our work is in the city of Richmond. It's very urban. And we deal with green space a lot. We don't necessarily deal with agriculture. But I think you've talked about the collateral benefits of spaces like this in terms of heat island and sustainability and water management, things like that we think about a lot. I think you've also talked about that one of the roadblocks maybe to scaling or moving forward is the acquisition of land. Mm-hmm. Whether it's through lease or borrow or purchase, has that gotten better as you moved along?
Yeah, it has. Our first efforts were a small part, fell under the Richmond Grows Gardens program. Parks and Rec has a program where community members can permit a vacant lot that's owned by the city of Richmond and turn it into a community garden. But we quickly realized that wasn't going to be enough. Over the last 3 years or so, we've really rooted ourselves in the conversation around land justice and what does it mean for communities that were brought to the Americas or were already here and the land was taken away from them. And in the case of people of African ancestry, were brought here as property, but never envisioned to own property, or that there were policies that were instituted to take property away from us. Now, we're very intentional about conversations about reparative land justice. 98% of farmland in the United States is owned by people of European ancestry. And that's astounding inequity, right? So we realize that in order for those tables to turn, we need redistribution of those resources. And fortunately, we've had real life examples of that work happening. In 2022, we received 80 acres as an act of land-based reparations in Amelia County. And then at the same time, we were able to purchase 5 acres through collaboration with a predominantly white-led organization called the Agrarian Trust. So now we own 85 acres of land in the region, and it changes our discourse dramatically, because now when we walk into rooms, we're landowners as organizers, right? And so we're also talking about conservation easements and, you know, how do we do zoning applications, and, you know, how do we have the capital to do the type of development that we feel is necessary. So yeah, it's a big deal. It's newer for us to have access to land and not have people in our ecosystem that have the familiarity with having land, right? And being able to make those type of deals and or just strategize on how to develop the land. Because I mean, you know, I come from a community, I grew up in apartments.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, we never owned, my mother and my family didn't own a house until I was in my teens. You know what I mean? And so there was no reference point. It's just kind of like we're figuring this out as we go along. So yeah, the land piece is imperative. If we really want to talk about equity, there is equity in property ownership, right? So people have a theoretical equity conversation, but there's a real equity conversation around property ownership, around finances and wealth building that is linked discourse when we're talking about racial equity. Yeah.
Well, it's leverage, right? It's a different conversation when there's leverage on both sides. Exactly. You mentioned grow up in an apartment. I'm curious, do you guys try to scale down some of this production to any kind of low-income housing? Do you team with RHA or anybody like that?
Yeah, so we train. Our work is primarily about building community capacity. We steward spaces all across the city, but we also train. So we teach community members how to grow food in their community, irrespective of whether or not they have land or a balcony or back porch, right? We do have a couple of partners within our ecosystem that we support. For example, Charles Gilpin Community Farm and Gilpin Court. We help support the development of that space in the footsteps of veteran activist Lily Estes, who was instrumental in getting that project up and running. We planted fruit trees, built permeable pathways in that space. We planted trees in like Fairfield Court. I mean, you know, all of those runways are only as open as the leadership of those organizations and their investment, right? And so sometimes folks see the light and what's possible, and other times it's not as bright. But we're always open to collaborating with like low-income community. I mean, the idea of low-income communities is crazy because, I mean, that's just where I'm from. But the reality is like, the people that own the property in those situations are often not the community members that live there. So we're, you know, always trying to navigate like who actually has control over the resources and how do we fuse collaborations with them that are rooted community control, members of the residents of those communities actually being in control of those spaces. So it's sometimes challenging, but I think what we've seen happen is, you know, give people the tools on how to grow their own food, right, is one thing, but then to also be like, hey, I have land available for you as well is another. And that's where our work is really rooted in this current moment, is that if someone wants to learn how to increase access to healthy food in their community, i.e. they want to learn how to farm, we can teach you. And then after we've taught you, we have access to land that we can connect you with so that you can actually start your farm journey, you know? And that's a part of us trying to like be what we needed.
So I just think that's interesting. So when you create these opportunities for people to come in, take a half an acre and start to grow, I will confess that My wife does all of our backyard farming. So I build boxes and do other things, but I have no idea what a half an acre can produce. And so are they feeding some of that food back into your market system?
Yeah, so that's part of our vision is that, all right, farming has not been necessarily marketed as the most sexy profession.
Really? You heard it here first.
Yeah. So we kind of got an uphill battle on that. But the way that it works is that there's a lot of young people that are finding personal development kind of like, they're getting a lot out of reconnecting back to the land. And so we try to show people that there are ways that you can do this that are sustainable, right? And the way that we do it is that if you grow a thing, we'll take that thing, buy it from you, and then sell it in a weekly, bi-weekly, monthly CSA program. So we have what we call the Black Farmer CSA. So the way it works is that anyone that we train, we put them on the land and we say, hey, man, you can definitely go out and develop your own market. You can definitely go out and try to do farmers markets and things like that. But if you're having trouble, we'll buy what you got. If you grow it successfully, no pesticides, no herbicides, it's healthy, nutrient dense, we'll copy from you. And so that's a form of revenue. It just depends on how intense people are growing. Some people, they're going hard. They're doing radishes, lettuces every week. Some guys are doing chicken, eggs, honey every week. Some folks are like every other week. But irrespective of who it is, it's like we'll put it into our supply chain. And that way, it incentivizes people participation. And it's not just like, I'm just doing this just to give the food away, because that's almost impossible to sustain. Right. Like how long can you do that? You know what I mean? It's a lot of work. And not to say I frown upon anybody that gives away food. It's just, you wouldn't want to give it away if you had to grow it as your job. You'd be like, yo, I put in sweat equity, man. I cut myself the other day. I needed to get, some right. stitches. But then I gave the food away. Like, that's insane. Like, what are we doing? Well, but I think that's another conversation for another day about food systems and how Americans devalue food or value food based on how, subsidies, all this stuff. It's just, it's a tangent.
Well, it is, it does circle back into, wealth building at a certain point. And not that there's maybe a ton of money in farming, but there's a value to what's produced. And the market should recognize that value.
Right. Right. And that's a big part of our discourse and our training is like, you said you don't know how much food you can produce on a half an acre. So we do the math. An acre is 43,560 square feet, right? So you got 4 seasons in the year. If you attribute a dollar value to each one of the square feet in that acre, you should be able to make at least $40,000 a year on your farm at the minimum. If you're growing consistently, you should be able to grow 40,000 pounds of produce, cumulative, spring, summer, fall, and if you got the right greenhouse infrastructure, you should be able to grow through the winter as well. So if gross, I could do at least 40,000, then it's all about numbers and developing your market and your price point. Right. That's a conversation that we have with folks. When they come through our training, it's like, might not grow the items that are like commonly available, right? On my farm here, we're growing strawberries in our greenhouse. We're growing purple carrots, right? We got fruit trees all around, but I'm getting ready to plant ginger and turmeric, right? Because those are high value crops that, you can't just go into a grocery store tomorrow and be like, hey, man, I want to go pick up some fresh turmeric, right? That's like a niche item, you know what I mean? And so I could take one of my greenhouses and lock that down with turmeric, but I know I'm going to get, $4 or $5 a pound off of the turmeric. Same thing with the ginger, you know what I mean? And so, it's just, being savvy, not necessarily like capitalist, but being like smart about what the market is doing and what people want. I grow a lot of hot peppers. I mean, a lot of hot peppers. I mean, I'm talking like ghost peppers, Trinidad scorpions, Carolina reapers, cayenne, serranos. I mean, I do hots. And the reason why I do hots is because I know that there's markets and international African and Latino communities that are looking for hot peppers, but then also know that if I don't sell them all, I can dry them out and I can make something else with them.
Right.
You know what I mean? So I just, it's all adaptable. It's all adaptable.
So I'm curious, I think about sort of green space and the agricultural opportunity, and we run across bigger companies, not in Richmond, but that are trying to develop rooftop agriculture and other integrated agriculture into more densely urban developments.
Sure.
Is that a viable thing? I mean, do you ever have conversations with developers locally about how you might integrate?
Yeah, so it is a viable conversation, and yes, we have had conversations with developers and collaborations with developers. So I used to work for Virginia State University years ago, and I was the director for the Harding Street Urban Ag Center, which is repurposed community center that was transformed into an indoor farm. This is like 2014. So we were kind of like way ahead of the curve. There's the $3 million grant. We turned the inside of that gym into a aquaponic, aeroponic, tower garden, grow space with solar on the roof, commercial kitchen in the back, refrigeration in one of the old classrooms. It was an amazing situation. I mean, and that stuff works. The only issue is that it's pricey.
Right.
It's a little cost intensive on the front end, but if you can develop a system and have a market, then you can make money on that all year round. I know companies like Gotham Greens, I mean, even locally, Babylon Farms, they're doing amazing work with like showcasing the ways that we can integrate technology into, alternative forms of farming. The rooftop conversation is amazing. I mean, I think that's stellar. There's so many examples further north that we could, implement here in Richmond, Virginia. I hope that we get on the wave on that. As far as the developers, like we've had developers that owned apartments that wanted to do green space, right? Kind of as a benefit for their residents as an amenity. But then we get in the room and we're like, man, you got a lot of roof space over here, my guy. You need to be talking about the stormwater tax credit that you can access if you do this green space. There's a way that you can make this impact your bottom line in terms of, the work you're doing as well. So there's been a couple collaborations like that we've had where developers understood that there was ways that they can impact their kind of like, community give back, but at the same time, their dollar revenue was impacted by this stuff as well. So I'm excited about folks that understand the importance of green space in cities, folks that are not gonna like put the green space on the back burner as they do their development, right? Because it makes the community even more attractive. It makes it even more popular. It makes it even more welcoming. It's a place that I wanna actually be. Because later on down the line, when you don't got the green space, people gonna be complaining about how hot it is, and then you got flooding issues. I mean, I think what we see here in Richmond, Virginia, a Scott's Addition is a prime example. It's like it was developed fast. It's a lot of streetscape. There's no green space. So when we have a major water rain event, just go down Broad and you see it. It's water everywhere because there's no way for that water to infiltrate in the way that the neighborhood is laid out. So it's like, let's make those investments on the front end so people don't have to pay for them on the back end. And then, in general, the city is now kind of like, we do have a stormwater management issue. I mean, I think we all knew it way before now, but, the fact that our combined sewer overflow is antiquated, from like the early 1900s, I think. And today, like, we can't fish in the James because the water from when I wash my car and put Armor All on my tires is mixing in with the water from your washing your clothes and your dishes. And, it got to go somewhere if it rains too hard. So, yeah.
It does. I mean, they're zoning, the city, the state, there's always tax incentives for certain things that the governmental entities want to get done. And, most of the developments that you see, they deal with stormwater in a tank or in pipes underground, and that has a cost. but you could see the right tax incentive to turn that into green space on a roof that solves stormwater and also could be an ag opportunity, heat island, all those sort of things.
Right.
Could really spur a change in thinking about how we do that.
Yeah. I think it just takes people that can think in 3 dimensions, right? I got $1 that I need to make, right, in order for this project to work. But then I also have an environmental service that I have to be, aware of that this built situation has to have. And then I got people that are going to live in this situation. Like when folks can think 3-dimensionally, environmental sustainability and just the benefit and impact of the people and then their financial bottom line, then you get unique ideas and strategies to like crest these challenges that we're experiencing. The last 5 years, like everybody's talking about urban heat island effect.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that's because people like feel the heat, like literally, you know what I mean? So now it's like, okay, well, what does it mean for us to plant trees in the city, right? Across, sidewalks. What does it mean for us to remove impervious surface? Right. What does it mean for us to like design a city that commands us to walk, right? So maybe that means that we got to take out some parking lots. But if we take the parking lots out, that means that it's going to get cooler because there's less impervious surface to radiate the heat. You know what I mean? When you think in 3 dimensions, you can see this thing for what it is and like start making decisions that make the city look cool. I mean, like cool, like HVAC cool. But at the same time, it's like, yo, this place is popping. It looks amazing. Like the design of the space, it's intuitive. It's telling me to go get my bike.
Right.
You know what I mean? Or catch the bus. Why do I need to have my Ford F-150 up and down Broad Street? I got the pulse. It's going up and down. I could park and just keep it moving. So all this stuff is I feel like sometimes it's kind of quarantined off into this realm of like social justice, but it's really just like, yo, how do we live? Like, what's the way? How do we engage our city? It's not some woke thing. I mean, the people like that, like to pigeonhole it. But yo, I don't want to be able to fry an egg on the sidewalk in my community. I would like to have trees. Maybe. I mean, I think that's nice, right?
I think if you ask people, do you want trees? They're like, yeah. If they ask people if they're going to come dig up part of their sidewalk and put a tree in, they're like, I don't know.
Right.
I mean,
am I going to have to care for the trees?
I just think people are resistant to change as a starting point.
Yeah.
So finding ways to move that message and how we live in small ways sometimes. I think when you start to have these conversations, and we do with partners in the city, everyone jumps to the end.
Right.
That I've got to do all of that.
Right.
And really maybe what we're asking is, no, we're just going to do this thing, right? And it's going to enact some change around that and eventually get there.
Yeah. That's the wave. Somebody told me the other day that if you want to get somewhere fast, the fastest way to go is to go slow.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, that's wild. But if you think about it, it's true. Like, I can't flash in the pan with folks on change. Like, people are resistant to drastic shifts in how they live. But here at Sankofa, I use this as an example. So when we first started here, we started here 3 years ago. The first thing we did was we planted a couple of trees, right? We planted like 20 trees. That was the first project. And then right after that, like somebody came and gave us 20 more trees. Right. And so I consider that slow because we could plant 20 trees on a Saturday. Right. And so maybe a couple months later, we come with another 20 trees. And then, a couple months later, we come with another 40 trees. And next thing you know, we got 100 and something fruit trees in the place. But it's not like, oh, we're going to do 100 and some fruit trees in one day. People are like, oh, my God, that's a lot. Right. But at the same time, other things are coming online because people are kind of converging and connecting with the space. I tell you, like, people see this space and be like, oh, man, I thought you were here like 15 years. I was like, no, we just come out every Saturday. And every Saturday we're consistent doing a thing. And that incremental growth, like if you've never been here, you're like, wow. But I'm like, no, man, we've been doing this every Saturday for the last 700 and maybe 800 days, and it shows off. It shows up in big because you weren't there in the beginning when we were just moving the pebble. That's
right. I mean, I'm sure there's people who drive by this every day and don't look at it 9 out of the 10 days. And the 10th day, they look, they're like, wow, what happened there? I think it's also times a conversation that you get some people who are like, well, if I can't get 160 fruit trees on Saturday, I'm out. But,
It's craziness. It's craziness.
Yeah.
I farm. So there's nothing that happens fast on the farm that's worth me, like, really getting excited about.
Right.
The work that we do in terms of building soil, it takes time. Like, I can't expect my soil quality to be where I need it to be the first year.
Right.
And it takes consistent adding of organic matter, adding of soil amendments, growing cover crops, keeping it moist. Like, that takes, like, year 2, maybe year 3 is where you really got it down packed, and I could just drop a seedling in there and I ain't even got to look back. But it doesn't happen in the beginning, and that's also kind of like, for me, a wisdom that I like hold for like doing community work is like, yo, you gotta, just be patient. It's just stay consistent. Like, chop wood. If I want to stay heated in the winter, I gotta chop wood. I mean, that takes time. It's effort, but for people that really want to see good things happen, it's not a high investment. You know what I mean? It's not a high investment.
Well, so as you think about this work that you're doing, are you trying to scale? I mean, I'm assuming you're still chasing land opportunities or not.
So for me, like, scale for me is different, because I'm not like looking for my organization to be like this multi-million-dollar endeavor. I'm more interested in like, how do I build capacity for other people to replicate what we've done? You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And then we grow an ecosystem where this gentleman over here or this woman over there has increased their ability to really meet the demand, and we're all in it together. And as a result of them coming up, growing, and really like mastering their particular part of the system, everybody upgrades as a result. You know what I mean? So it's like, that to me, scale is that. Like, how do I get more people on land? How do I get more people connected to this conversation, get them resourced, right? And then show them the patterns. Like, for us, it's like, yo, I farm, I got cold storage, I got a food truck, right? So we distribute food, we grow food, and then we integrate that food into our dinners and we sell those. So for us, that works. And I feel like it can work for other people, but like, everybody don't have to do it the same way.
Right.
But if I can get 10 people, 20 people, 30 people into the work, then yeah, that's to me, that's the way to go. Because I ain't trying to do everything.
But it is scale.
I'm trying to be 50 and retired. I mean, I got plans. I want to be chilling as my gravel guy.
It's still scale, though. I mean, you're still scaling an organization, and I'm assuming that some of those people will be entrepreneurial and go start sort of what you're doing and start to scale out of their thing. I mean, you could start to see that.
Yeah. I think, I did start, when I first started doing it, I was doing startups and startup talks and, try to competitions, things like that. And I got scared of the word scale, because it's like, yo, I don't want to go national. I'm here. I'm from here. My kids are here. My family's here. I'm not trying to go. You know what I mean? I ain't trying to create a product, package it up, and say. I mean, I would love to do that, but I really enjoy what I do. Yeah. You know what I mean? So I think the closest thing that for like us to like really take it above like where we're at right now, I guess, is creating like an online training for people to like anywhere they can learn how to do this stuff. And then like teaching people about the conservation easement aspects and the land access pieces, because those were parts of the puzzle that I wish I knew when I first started. I wish somebody would have came and gave me jewels on, yo, you need to go get some land, right? An acre, find it. And if you can get an acre in the city, put it under conservation, sell the conservation easement on that land and keep it as a farm, as a green space. Mm-hmm. And you could use that money to, invest in other things. You know what I mean? I didn't know anybody that did that. I only found out about it the last 3 years. So yeah, that's the energy. I think like the more people that come into this work and like grow and like understand where we failed in it, I think that's for me scale. Yeah, that's scale.
So I guess Last question. What's the best way for people to get to know your organization, participate, events? I mean, what's one plug you could give to sort of raise awareness?
Yeah, so thenaturalfestival.com is our website, but we're doing a lot of work on social media, so you can follow Duron Chavis me on Instagram, also on the other ones, Facebook, YouTube, and all that stuff. You can tap in that way. You could just reach out. Actually, if you're local, it probably would be best if you just show up. You know what I mean? If you come to Sankofa Community Orchard on a Saturday and between the hours of 1 and 4 o'clock, you can actually see what we are doing here. And I think it's one thing to talk about it, but like to actually see it in practice, it changes the way you relate to it. Because, sometimes it's like we have intellectual exercises about this type of stuff. And,
right.
You know what I mean? It's like, no, bro, come out here, man, and pick some blackberries. I think you will like it. You know what I mean? So that's my plug. Come through the Sankofa Community Orchard Saturdays 1 to 3, or follow us on social media, or visit our website.
Well, I think maybe we'll probably do a little tour of the garden, but it's a beautiful spot. So, people should come out and see it for themselves, because I had not been out here, and it's really lovely. Well, thank you. Thank you for the time.
It's a great conversation.
I really appreciate it.
Yeah, for sure.
All right.